Jacksonville, a great and growing city, is a major port, a military center, and a focal point for railroads, banking and insurance. Within the city, there is a university. The university's mission is to serve the community of which it is a vital part and to make the life of the community richer and more meaningful in every way it can. Geological evidence in the area indicates that where the university now stands, a seacoast stood some 30,000 years ago. With the passage of time and the recession of the sea, ecological conditions changed. The pelicans and gulls followed the receding coastline. The shellfish died. The sea oats vanished. But the sea left behind an enduring legacy. The ocean currents, pounding waves, and ceaseless winds shaped the sands into flatlands and dunes. Historical records and local legends suggest that this area played an important role in the development of young Florida. When the earliest of the European settlers arrived, they were entranced with the wonderland of the New World. In time, the new settlers tamed the land and began using its natural resources for their own purposes. One such resource, which was of great value to the settlers, was Florida's natural timber. Before the white man came, the lowland swamp areas were extensive cypress forests. Logging activities during the 19th and 20th centuries largely decimated the original bald cypress. The longleaf pine that once dominated the pine flatwoods is now rare. Today, a section of land is protected and preserved in its natural state as a part of the Florida State University system. The entire 1,000-acre campus of the University of North Florida is designated as a wildlife refuge. It may well become an island of natural beauty in years to come. Like all growing cities, Jacksonville has its growing pains. Urban blight, crime, slums, poverty, crowding and pollution. The people of the University of North Florida have committed themselves and the university to preserving the wilderness of this land as a heritage for the future generations. There are several nature trails which wind their way through the various ecosystems on the campus. The trails serve the public not only as a recreational facility, but also as an educational resource. They are, in fact, a living laboratory. The trails were chosen in such a way that 5 distinct ecological areas could be observed firsthand. This ecosystem is called the Pine Flatwoods. When the campus was an ancient seacoast, some of it was entirely flat with no dunes. These areas were the bottoms of shallow lagoons. When the sea retreated, these sandy areas were left without the relief of the dunes. Since these areas are flat, rainwater does not run off quickly. As years passed, an ecosystem developed which today we call the Pine Flatwoods. In some parts of the flatwoods, bogs may develop, and in dry seasons, fire may sweep the woods. Any plant which survives in the flatwoods must be fire tolerant. The dominant trees here are the slash pine and the longleaf pine. Pine flatwoods are characterized by poorly drained soils with high acidity. Other plant life which thrives here has its own special beauty, such as the wild potato vine or morning glory, the orange milkwort, the violet, and the common dog fennel. The pine flatwoods today are used to grow slash pine, primarily for wood or pulp production, as man's need for building materials and paper increases. In contrast to the pine flatwoods, there are areas of the university campus which have substantial changes in elevation. These are the locations of the ancient dunes. Rain that falls on the top of the dunes or ridge areas soaks down through the soil quickly. The sloping contour of the land causes the water to drain off into the troughs on either side. Thus the sand ridges are very dry, and they are the next ecological area. The plants that live here can survive long dry periods and can take quick advantage of the water when it does fall. Since the sand ridges are dry and often hot, another force which plays a prominent role in shaping this ecosystem is fire. The plants which survive here must be adapted to withstand periodic burning. Among the important trees which are found on the sand ridges are the longleaf pine and the turkey oak. The longleaf pine is a magnificent and valuable tree, sometimes attaining great size. Many of the most beautiful homes in the south, particularly the older ones, are built from its wood. The longleaf pine is also an important source of turpentine. The scars of ancient turpentine slashes are found on some of the larger trees. Whole pots and pot shards, once used for collecting the resin, can also still be found on campus. The most abundant tree on the sand ridge is the turkey oak, also called the blackjack oak. While these trees are well adapted to survive and flourish in this difficult habitat, they are rather small and somewhat scrubby. They have little commercial value and are often regarded as weed trees by those who look at the forest from a commercial point of view. It becomes difficult to remember this when their leaves turn in the late fall. Since the ridge is high and dry, it is highly suitable for development. It is also well suited to the cultivation of citrus in the warmer parts of the state. For these reasons, and because it has few defenders, the sand ridge ecosystem is probably the most rapidly disappearing ecosystem in Florida. In the area of the campus where fire does not penetrate, such as the troughs between the ancient dunes, we find an entirely different ecosystem, the river bottom swamp. Here we find trees which are shade tolerant and not fire resistant, such as the red maple and the bald cypress. The swamp is flooded or wet most of the year, resembling the bottom of a slowly moving river. The river bottom swamp is the nearest thing we have on campus to a climax-type community. It is not quite a climax-type community now, because some 60 years ago it was logged and the mature trees were removed, particularly the great bald cypress. A few of them were spared because they were unsuitable for lumber. They tower over the swamp as mute reminders of the hundreds of such trees which once existed. The younger bald cypress trees will someday attain an equal size and stature, but no man living now will see that day. Mosses and lichens abound in this environment. Tree moss and lichen add a splash of color to the tree trunks. Flowers, such as the white aster and the primrose willow, compete with the red maple, which blazes twice a year. River bottom swamps were prime targets for development into farmland by early settlers. Much of Florida's original swamps were drained, and these ecosystems were destroyed. Remaining wetlands are now protected by state and federal laws. Nature is subtle in her design, and her ecosystems are fragile. Between the river bottom swamp and the high sand ridge area is a narrow band of vegetation known as the transition swamp. In this system, there is a larger variety of plant life than in any of the other ecosystems on campus. The stresses such as fire, flooding or drought occur less frequently than in other ecosystems. Since these stresses are rare, transition swamps devote most of their energies to self-maintenance and survival. The thick canopy of vegetation and plentiful moisture, combined with a rich organic soil, create a system of high productivity. Examples of this thriving community are the loblolly bay, the spiderwort, the tar flower, broom sage, and many kinds of ferns. The last ecological area on campus is possibly the most beautiful. It is the hydric hammock. The natural community living in this area is adapted to frequent flooding which subsides after a long period of drainage. The hydric hammock system constitutes much of the natural drainage system of the campus. All around these ecosystems, communities of wildlife live and die. Depending on which of the ecosystems interests you the most, and depending on how far you wish to walk, you may choose among 3 nature trails. All 3 are self-guiding with signposts at every crossroad, so you will not lose your way. The Red Maple Boardwalk was especially constructed for handicapped people and for those who prefer a solid wooden walkway to a path in the woods. The boardwalk takes you through the heart of a river bottom swamp and requires about 20 minutes to walk. Look for the rare green fly orchid. This orchid grows farther north than most other orchids because it can withstand freezing temperatures. For the more adventuresome, there are 2 nature trails on well-marked paths. The Blueberry Trail takes you through a transition swamp, a river bottom swamp, across a sandy ridge, and back home through another transition area and along a hydric hammock. The trail is 1.5 miles long and takes about 45 minutes. The longest trail is the Goldenrod Trail, which is about 2.5 miles long. Those who take this trail will experience several samples of the 5 ecosystems. They will penetrate deep into the preserve and are most likely to observe wildlife. Remember that the campus is a wildlife sanctuary and that any disturbance of life, either plant or animal, is expressly forbidden. Leave nothing behind but your cares. Take nothing away but tranquility and inspiration.